Hey everybody, it's Mr. Marshall here at Stony Lane. I want to talk to you about research, right? Research. So research, if we think about what that word even means, let's talk about what it means, right? So research is actually spelled like this. Research. Do you see a word inside of research? It's got the word search inside it, right? When you look for something, and when we have the letters R-E at the beginning of any word, it means to do something again. It's to look for something again, right? And the thing is, when we research stuff, we find it again. But the difference is that when we find it again, we're supposed to find it in a way that no one else in the world has ever found it. Okay? So what I mean by that is like when, a scientist finds a dinosaur bone, like they didn't invent the dinosaur bone, but they kind of bring new meaning to it, right? They try to think, well, how did this dinosaur live, right? What other bones can this bone go together with, right? And so when we research, we try to find stuff again, but find it in our own way, okay? So one way to do that is to take some of the different facts, because you find a lot of facts about things that you're researching, don't you? And try and put them together in a new way. Okay, let me show you what I mean. So one of the things that we research sometimes is we research famous people. And so I was looking at some books about this famous person. Okay, this is Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was an actress, and she's what's called a comedian. She made people laugh, and maybe you've seen her face before. She had a really famous show a long time ago called I Love Lucy, right? Maybe you've seen I Love Lucy. And she had other shows too, but that was the famous one because that was this TV show that made her famous. It was one of the first TV shows that everybody in the United States saw, and now they watch her show I Love Lucy all over the world. And I Love Lucy was created in the 1950s, so that's over 70 years ago. And people are still watching I Love Lucy. Okay? And so I want to learn more about her. But I don't want to just say all the fun facts, like a first grader would, and then she did this, and then she did that, right? I want to try and take the facts and kind of grow a new idea about Lucille Ball that maybe other people haven't had. Okay? So watch what I do. I'm going to take some facts. When I was reading this book about Lucille Ball, one of the things that I learned was that she had a husband named Desi Arnaz, and Desi Arnaz was not American; he was Cuban American. He came from Cuba, and people were like, "People are not going to believe that you're really married, right?" Because he was playing her husband on TV, and they said, "You can't play her husband. No one's going to believe that you're married," but they were really married. But in those days, people thought if someone was Cuban, they couldn't marry someone that wasn't Cuban. Okay? They thought that was just strange, right? We know that that's not true anymore, right? So what they did was Lucy and Desi went on a tour, and they acted and they sang and they did stuff together, and people really saw, yeah, they belong together, right? And so I'm gonna write that here as being with Desi, right? That's a reminder of that whole thing that I just told you. Being with Desi, she showed them that she could be with Desi Arnaz, okay? A second thing that she did was, while they were making I Love Lucy, they kind of created something called the rerun. They decided to tape the shows and keep them. And then they could show them again and again and again. Okay, and they realized that that's a good way to keep the show alive. I mean, it's still going 70 years later, right? And they also made some money that way because they could resell the tapes, right? And so that's something called the rerun. They invented the rerun. Okay, and that's today when we see things streaming on Netflix or other places, that all started there. A long time ago, 70 years ago, right? One more thing that she did was when she made her show Then they created a studio called Desilu, right? And that was the mix of their names, Desi and Lucy. So they created Desilu, and Lucy was the boss. She was the boss of Desilu, okay? And back in those days, people thought, well, a man has to be the boss. Women can't be the boss, but she was. So she was a female boss, or what they call executive. Okay, so here are 3 important facts that I read a lot about in my book. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if there's something new that I can learn by kind of like putting these facts together. And the way that I do that is I pick the one that I think I could talk the most about. Okay, and I'm going to like make some notes on the right. And then I'm going to see, does my thought go with another fact too? Okay, so let's see. I think I could talk about this one first because I feel like I understand that one the best. So being with Desi. So in those days, people thought that someone who was from a certain background could only be married to someone with that same background. And she didn't like that because she didn't actually live that, right? Like she and her husband came from different places. And they're like, what's the big deal? Why is that not okay? And so they went around and they proved that this was going to be okay. Okay. And they started changing people's minds, right? And people were like, yeah, I like them. They can be together on this TV show. So they changed. I'll write this way so it's easier. They changed people's minds by not listening to them, by just trying something new, right? So now I wrote that they changed people's minds by trying something new. Is that true about any of these others? Yeah. This one, they changed people's minds because they're like, yeah, Lucy's going to be the boss. Like, we don't care if you don't like that. She's going to be the boss. And so they changed people's minds by not listening to them, by just doing it. They just did it. They didn't listen. They just did it. Okay? They did that with their performance, the 2 of them together. They did that with Lucy being the boss, even though she was a woman, and that was different, right? So does that happen here too? It does, but kind of in a different way, right? They tried something new. They created a rerun. And so it wasn't just about people's minds. It was about the way they worked, right? It was about the way they worked. And this was about the way they worked too. And this was kind of about the way they worked too, because they created reruns. And then that was another thing that they could do, that they could use in their work on television. So the way they worked. And so now what I'm thinking is Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, they changed people's minds about the way they see each other and about the way they work. Because they didn't care that their ideas were new. They didn't care that other people didn't like their ideas. They tried them and they proved that those ideas were good. Right? Do you see what I'm doing? Anybody could have said anything like else about Lucille Ball, but I had a brand new idea about her, right? And I did that by naming some facts that I could talk a lot about. I talked about the one that I thought I could say the most about, and then I thought, does that idea happen in the other facts too? And then I kind of like talked about that, or I could write about it. And that's how you kind of research. You think of something new about something old, okay? That's really exciting to do as a writer. So why don't you try that? And I'll see you next time.